Call reluctance is a major issue among sales professionals today, one that can have serious implications for an organization's success. In fact, it's estimated that over 80% of sales representatives miss their quota due to call reluctance. Now, I'm not sure how much that means to you in lost revenue for your organization, but I'm sure you can do the math on your own. First of all, hi, my name is Michael Padone. I own salesbuzz.com, and today we're going to discuss why SDRs are struggling with call reluctance. So why are SDRs so hesitant to pick up the phone? How can sales managers overcome this challenge for their team? So again, in this session, we're going to explore 3 reasons why SDRs are not picking up the phone and suggest ways to help them become more confident communicators so that they start making more dials and having more success and being more efficient at it. So before I do that, though, I think it's important for you to understand that SDRs don't pick up the phone because they're afraid of rejection. It really is that simple. That's the reason right there. It can be intimidating as an SDR to make cold calls and risk rejection by a potential customer or a lead. Now, this fear is often compounded by the fact that many SDRs, they're expected to make daily quotas on calls, which they should, right? They should have that quota, and that puts additional pressure on them to perform, which again, I'm totally okay with. But if they crack, that's not what we want, right? So we got to get them to rise to the occasion. So the reason SDRs have call reluctance and don't pick up the phone is very simple. It's because they lack the necessary training and experience. It boils down to that. New sales reps are often taught popular but ineffective sales techniques, while experienced SDRs rely too heavily on their existing accounts, and leaves them vulnerable and unprepared and unable to handle cold calling for new prospects when their existing accounts run low, right? So to help close this skills gap, sales managers should use comprehensive online programs for onboarding and retraining that include detailed guides on best practices for cold calling and provide ample practice opportunities for sales reps to hone their skills. What I'm saying is they have to have some type of system in place where they can get better, but they have to make sure that if they're going to put the time and effort into it, that they have to be learning the right things. As practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And if you're learning sales techniques that are going to cause rejection and failure, you're just going to reinforce the problem. So you don't want to do that. And I'm not a fan of hiring somebody to come in and spend a lot of money on having somebody come in to train your team, because really what they're lacking is basic sales skills. And with today's technology, I mean, sure, if we were going back 10, 15 years ago, online training and on-demand training was new then, but you could save yourself so much money and fix the problem right away if you find the right solutions and you give them the right training for that. With that being said, on that point, there's just no sense in reinventing the wheel. To be successful in sales, you need to master, not learn, right? You need to master the following: openers, what you say after hello, my name is, gatekeepers, voicemails, engagement questions to get the conversation started, qualifying. This is one of the biggest areas right here most salespeople struggle with. They think they're really great at it, but they're not. It's qualifying on problem recognition, making sure they can identify, does a problem exist? To do that, you have to know how to get the conversation started, which falls back to the engagement questions, which you can't ask engagement questions if you can't get them to call you back, if you can't get that past the gatekeeper, or if you're hearing no thanks, understood, we're all set, because you used the wrong opener. Right. So everything connects to itself. And when you're trying and you're learning improper techniques and you're trying to make cold calls, it's very easy to start to feel that call reluctance. Okay. So you have to prove in those skills. And with today's technology, with the on-demand courses that are available, if you've learned from the right person, then it's so inexpensive and the ROI is so high that there's no sense you, the sales manager, because you usually have enough on your plate to try to find to try to develop your own program to get them to be better. So there's lots of tools out there that you can find to get this done. But the biggest takeaway right here from what I'm saying is you can't just learn it. Sales reps, you can't just learn it. You have to master it. There are no average cold calling sales reps out there. You're either really good at it or you suck. It's just that there's no in between. You have to be really good at it to be successful. And the only way you're going to get really good at it is you have to master the sales skills. So mastering cold calling is a critical skill for any SDR, one that requires time, dedication, and support from both leaders and colleagues alike. by understanding why SDRs are reluctant to pick up the phone in the first place and implementing strategies to help them become more confident communicators, your team will be well equipped with all the tools they need to hit those tough quotas. And make no mistake, it all comes down to learning the right techniques in the most effective way possible, and then creating a culture where role playing is part of the learning process. Yes, I said role playing. And look, I know that the only thing salespeople hate more than cold calling is role playing, but iron sharpens iron. Okay, so with all of that being said, I did a survey of a lot of sales managers and sales directors regarding cold calling, and here are the top 3 most popular excuses. Reasons why SDRs said they aren't picking up the phone, and I'm going to give you a couple ideas on how to solve it. Okay, so besides doing the obvious and getting them the right training, here are some of the reasons why they said they're not picking up the phone, and I'm going to offer you some ways to solve it. First one is this. The number one sales manager said that their number one reason that the reps gave them for not picking up the phone is they don't have anybody's phone numbers anymore. Okay, they only have email addresses. Okay, fair enough. This is really easy to solve. You just got to think out of the box. Okay, if you only have email addresses, why don't you just do this? You or have somebody from the marketing team. If you don't have somebody in the marketing team, if you're a smaller company, you can do this yourself. It's very inexpensive. Why not just create a webinar with a catchy title and subject that agitates a pain and scratches an itch for your target audience, and then run a few email campaigns that include a link to the registration form that requires a phone number. So if you only have email addresses, then again, create a catchy webinar. You want a webinar that's going to be short, but to the point. It agitates the pain, scratches an itch, something that speaks to your target audience. And set up a couple email campaigns, send it out to them, get them to register. They have to fill the form out, have it required a phone number, right? This is one of the best ways to resurrect old leads and get new prospects on your radar as well. After the webinar, so you do the webinar, you don't make the webinar a sales pitch, okay? You actually do what you said you're gonna do, solve that particular problem. Don't ask for anything in return. Just promote the webinar. You're going to help them solve XYZ. They get on, they log in. You or the subject matter expert at your company presents the problem, explains why it's a problem, what's causing the problem, and here's how you solve it, and just end the webinar. It's not a commercial. You just solve it, right? Because the formula is get them to know you, like you, then they trust you, then they pay you. Now, when you've collected all that information, you got their phone numbers, and they just saw how you can help solve some problems, you're now on their radar. So after the webinar, if you've taken the time during the time you've improved or set up a webinar and you did a little bit of email marketing to drive traffic to that, during that time, if the sales team started to learn the right ways to pick up the phone once they have these new leads, you're going to start seeing a success right out of the gate. Make sense? Okay, so again, after the webinar, you take the time to improve your phone sales skills properly, and you know how to pick up the phone, and you call the leads that sign up for the webinar. It's easy peasy. And that gets rid of that excuse. Does it work? Look, I used this playbook in 2008 when I first launched salesbuzz.com, and I'm still here more than a decade later. It works. You don't need something new. This is the other thing I see all the time. People are on LinkedIn. They're always looking for some new sales technique. I'm telling you guys, the reason why you and your team are struggling is because nobody's using the basics anymore. Go back to basics, master the basics. All right. And one of the very basic things to do is lead gen. You can use a webinar today to capture those leads. You can also use it to resurrect old dead leads that are in there that were once hot and now not. It's a great way to reintroduce yourself, also get new prospects in the funnel. And now you don't have to worry about, oh, I don't have phone numbers. They go ahead and they fill the form out, and now you have it. Okay. The second most popular reason SDRs gave their sales manager is this: prospects prefer email. Look, I literally laughed out loud. This one made me laugh. Of course, prospects prefer email to getting a cold call. But what does that have to do with anything? You're in sales. That means you have to go out and drum up business. You have to create or develop business opportunities. Some of you even have the words business development in your job title and your job description. If your base salary was directly tied to the number of dials you made, meaning you would only earn X amount per dial, would you really care that the prospects prefer email? I don't think so. Now, again, I've been a straight commission sales rep forever and a day. I'm talking like my entire adult working life. So making those outbound calls, if I didn't make those outbound calls and I wasn't successful at it, my family didn't eat. When you approach it that way, you're not really that concerned that, oh, they prefer emails, right? Now, if you ask them, and this is the thing, you see this on LinkedIn, you'll have some stupid guru out there saying, don't cold call, they prefer emails, reach out this way. Of course, if you ask a client or a prospect, do you prefer between those two options, they're going to pick that one. If you also had a survey that said, do you prefer cold emails or do you prefer only to reach out when you're interested? They would have picked only reach out when I'm interested. Okay. But then you would be an order taker. So you can't worry about them, what they prefer, because at the end of the day, when you learn who your target audience is, and you know what problems they have to have that your solution solves, and what the negative effects are of those problems, you're actually doing them a disservice if you sit around and wait for them. Or if you just want to send an email. First of all, I think the average emails that go out, 20% of them go to spam anyway. So right off the bat, 20% of your prospects aren't even getting your message. But if you pick up the phone, you call and you leave a voicemail every time, 100% of them are going to get the voicemail. And when you learn how to leave the right voicemail, you're going to get more callbacks. Do you need 100% of voicemails to call you back? No. But if you got 10% of them to call you back, that's 100% more than what you're getting if you don't leave a voicemail. Make sense? So the best solution is to call first. If you get voicemail, leave a message and then send an email. And then go send a LinkedIn connection. Okay. And then a lot of times, if you have their cell number, or if you have a number from a webinar they fill out, a lot of them are putting their cell numbers in because they're working remotely or whatever. A lot of times I'll text them as well after that. Hey, just left your voicemail regarding XYZ. And then I have a whole script that I use for that, but I don't want to get into that now because we're going to run out of time. But with that, my points being is there's a whole process there. You want to be assertive to help them. Make sense? All right. So with that being said, again, you have to understand that being hired in a sales position means you have the most important job in the entire company. I'm going to say this again. If you're in sales, you have the most important job in the entire company, because your sales revenue doesn't just go to cover your salary. Okay. It goes towards covering everyone's salary as well. And if you're not producing the amount of revenue that the company needs per sales rep, they're going to need to replace you with somebody else who can. And they're going to have to do it fast. Now, remember that even to this day, like I said earlier, I'm a straight commission sales rep. So if the sales techniques I use work for me, how much more effective are they going to be for you when you already have a base salary? How much more could you actually earn? Now, I do not have call reluctance because I know all the steps in the phone sales process and have practiced them repeatedly until I've mastered them. And I had no other choice. So using the excuse that prospects prefer email is literally cost you, I'm going to say, at least 50% additional earnings per year. Now multiply that number, whatever that number is for you, multiply that by the number of years you plan on staying in sales. Do you really want to leave all that money on the table? I know I wouldn't. Okay, so now, before we run out of time, the last reason given is my favorite. The good old, we tried it, it doesn't work excuse. Now, I have no doubt it did not work for you if you gave that reason. I'm not saying you're lying, but it only means that it did not work for you because you do not yet possess the phone skills required to make it work, and or your lack of drive and desire to learn them. So that's the other thing too, right? You can admit that you don't have the skills, but if you can also admit that you don't have the desire to learn them, something's got to change. You're not in the right position, or you have to do something. Because again, if we go back to what I said earlier, if you're in sales, you're responsible for everybody's salary. You need to produce your share. Okay. So there's no excuse not to invest in yourself or your team to learn from those who have already proven to be the best in their field. And I'm not talking just sales. I'm talking about whatever it is in life. In the past, most sales experts, actually, let me scratch that. Most experts in any field, not just sales, but any field, were not, how do I want to say this? Their fees that they charge as being an expert are so high because they had to share their knowledge face to face. Again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. So in the past, again, no matter what field you're in, if you had to hire an expert, you had to pay a lot of money. They were not cost effective. Only the big companies could afford these experts to come in and train their people because they had to charge for their time. They could only be in one place at one time. With today's online learning environment, when you find an expert that really knows what they're talking about in any field, almost all of them now, you can literally learn from the best in the world in whatever you are interested in for a fraction of what it would cost 10, 20, 30 years ago. I have never seen successful people achieve their desired outcomes by making excuses or not investing in themselves. Think about that. Don't just take my word for it. Look at any person that's been successful, people that you admired. They put the time and the work in, and they didn't let money stand in their way. If there was somebody else that knew how to solve the problems that would make them better, they did whatever they could to learn it. And call reluctance is a symptom. That's what I want you to understand. The solution to the problem is fixable by learning how to master. There's that word again. You don't just learn a few sales techniques. To be successful in cold calling, and by the way, let me just hit the pause button for a second. I don't want you to have to cold call. I don't. With that being said, if you do not have enough warm leads coming in to where you can hit your numbers, meet or exceed your quota, your expected revenue that you need to generate for the company, you have, the only alternative is to do outbound, okay? And the good news is, when you become an expert outbound sales rep, when the inbound leads come in, your close rates go higher because the sales process is exactly the same for when you master cold calling as it would be if you get an inbound lead. You follow the same steps. A lot of times right now, sales reps who rely on inbound leads, they're glorified order takers. They skip a lot of steps, so that's why their close rate is down. But when you have to do outbound cold calling and you master it, and you get really good at it, and you do get those inbound leads all of a sudden, and you're so used to following the steps that you need to follow to be successful, and you use those same steps on an inbound lead, you're not skipping steps, your close rate goes up. Okay? So with that being said, call reluctance is a system. The solution to the problem is fixable by learning how to master the skill set that I mentioned earlier. And all of this reminds, by the way, when it comes to investing in yourself, this reminds me of my Brian Tracy story. If you followed me before, I'm sure you read it on my blog. You can just Google Sales Buzz plus Brian Tracy story. But here's the gist of it. It's how I turned, you ready for this? My Brian Tracy story is how I turned a $199 investment into a $1.2 million commission check. Let me go over this for you real quick and how I did it. I was working as a straight commission rep for a company selling computer diagnostics. We're going way back, okay? Brian Tracy, first of all, if you don't know who Brian Tracy is, back 20, 30, 40 years ago, he was like the top guru at the time, right, for sales. Okay, so a sales rep for Brian Tracy came into our company that I was working for, selling tickets to his upcoming sales workshop he was having in downtown Tampa. I asked my employer if they would pay for me to go. They said they wouldn't. Now, keep in mind, I'm a straight commission sales rep. They wouldn't pay for me to go. So I bought the ticket myself and asked for the day off. They wouldn't give me the day off. I went anyway. While I was there at the conference, I ended up buying an additional $500 worth of Brian Tracy's VHS and cassette tapes. This is, by me, some of you don't even know what a VHS is or a cassette tape, but Google it, right? So that's how long ago this was. With that being said, I really couldn't afford it at the time, but I did it anyway, and I studied the heck out of those tapes. I made my money back within 1 week, but the relationship with my company turned sour. I left and went to work for another company and made even more money than I was making at my previous job. From there, I went off and started my own first business before Sales Buzz. I started it from scratch. It was in the middle of the dot-com bomb. Everybody else was going out of business, and I started a business. And then within 5 years later, I was offered $1.2 million all cash for somebody. They wanted to buy my company, and I cashed out within 5 years. 109. That all started from me investing in myself, that $199, and then one thing led to another and another. It's like the butterfly effect. So after taking about 6 months off of work, after I sold my original company, that's when I started Sales Buzz. None of that would have happened if I didn't find a way to get phone numbers, if I had been afraid to pick up the phone because prospects prefer email over receiving a phone call, or if I didn't consistently work at learning and improving my phone sales skills. So with that being said, You can literally live like a rock star if you're in sales. The better you get at it, the more you invest. Don't worry, you will. Look, I've taken a lot of sales training programs before. I've always, even if I didn't agree with a lot of them, I always found at least one thing that I could add to my toolkit that over the lifespan of my career, sales career, I always found value and I got an ROI on. Okay. With that being said, I can't get this through enough. It's not enough just to learn some new sales techniques. If you want to overcome call reluctance, you want to be really great at sales, you have to master the techniques. And that's how you'll overcome call reluctance. Know that there is literally a step-by-step process to picking up the phone that's repeatable. And it doesn't matter what industry it's in. It doesn't matter. You could be computer software, it could be SaaS, it could be, IT, it could be logistic, whatever it is. The sales process is literally the same. The basic sales 101 is the same. The problem is most salespeople do not know the basics, and that's why they're struggling. They don't even know how to pique interest in the first few seconds of the phone call. And then once they do pique interest, they don't know what to do next, and they often pull questions out of the air. You hear the prospect's temperature level drop, and now you've lost, and they say, sounds good, send me some information. And now you think you have a deal in the pipeline, you're chasing them, you're wasting time, and you lost an opportunity. More importantly, you continue to lose more opportunities in the future because you're chasing somebody that you should have closed earlier, and now they're never going to buy from you. Okay? Fix the basics. You're going to overcome call reluctance. You'll make a ton of money. Hope this helps.